Welcome everybody for joining today. My name is Tabitha Hanlon and I'm an advisor with the Kentucky REC. And joining me today is going to be one of my fellow advisors, Robin Colonel. In this short video, we're going to cover how to determine QPP eligibility for providers working in an FQHC or an RHC and give you some insight on planning for participation in the Quality Payment Program. All right, so on this first slide, FQHCs and RHCs generally bill Medicare Part A for many of the services that they provide. But there are, as you know, some services that must be billed to Medicare Part B. So if you look to the right-hand side of your screen, we have a statement directly from qpp.cms.gov regarding FQHCs and RHCs. It states, if you bill for Medicare Part B services exclusively through the RHC or FQHC payment methods, then you are not eligible for payment adjustments under MIPS. However, if you are a part of an RHC or an FQHC and bill for Medicare Part B services under the physician fee schedule, then payments for those services could be eligible for MIPS payment adjustments. So if you do receive payments under Medicare Part B in the physician fee schedule, that is going to go towards your low volume thresholds. And for the Quality Payment Program for MIPS, there are 3 separate low volume thresholds used to determine eligibility for reporting. And those are going to revolve around, first, the amount of Medicare Part B billing that you do. Next is going to be the number of attributed Medicare beneficiaries. And last is the number of covered professional services. And Robin is going to go into a little bit more detail in the next slide regarding those 3 low volume thresholds. But services billed and paid through the Medicare Part B physician fee schedule are going to count toward those low volume thresholds, and they're going to help to determine eligibility for the Quality Payment Program. So checking eligibility is very important. You wouldn't want to ever assume that all providers are exempt because they're practicing in an FQHC or an RHC. And you wouldn't also want to assume that they're not eligible this year because they weren't eligible last year. You're going to want to check that on a regular basis. And Robin is going to cover in a little more depth the low volume thresholds, eligible clinicians, and QPP eligibility requirements.
Thanks, Tabitha. So yes, as she mentioned earlier with the Quality Payment Program eligibility, there are some eligible clinician determination factors. One, they have to be an eligible clinician type, which we've listed on the screen here for you. They have to exceed that low volume threshold and not be a qualifying participant in an alternative payment model, and they must be enrolled as a Medicare provider for at least 1 year prior to that performance period. And CMS looks at 2 different time periods when determining eligibility. It's a 2-year look back period. So they look at, for this case, for the 2023 program year, they're going to look at October of 2021 through September 2022, and then pick up again with October of 2022 and look through September of 2023. And they refer back to all of the claims submitted to CMS and look for those that are submitted for Part B billing. So merit-based incentive program, the MIPS program has to have at least $90,000 in Part B billing, at least 200 Medicare patients, and at least 200 professional services provided. To be considered a qualifying participant in an advanced alternative payment model system, you must have at least 50% of your payments or at least 35% of your Medicare patients being attributed to the provider through that APM. So I mentioned earlier, looking at eligibility, there's 2 options with the QPP program. You can look at the qpp.cms.gov homepage and just type in the provider's NPI number there, or you can go to that same website and then go over to the right-hand side of that top of the page and it'll say QPP portal sign in. And it's at this point that you would use your login information for your particular organization's portal. And once you sign into that page, then you would come to this one. And as you see in the left hand, the eligibility and reporting is circled here. You would click on that page. It would take you specifically to this page that first starts with the practice name. And so if you have access to more than one practice, you could see that on this page. But you'll notice that at the practice level, or sometimes we call it the group level or the tax ID level, CMS provides you with whether or not that practice exceeds the low volume, what the total number of Medicare patients are seen at this practice, the allowed charges, and covered services as well, and then any special statuses that's applicable. And then on the right-hand side, we have circled a link for viewing your practice details and your clinician eligibility. And at this page, you would find the list of clinicians that are tied to your particular organization or listed under that particular tax ID. And then the same information would be provided at the individual level that's provided here at the group. So you would still find number of Medicare patients, allowed charges, covered services, and special statuses. So once you check your eligibility, there's some decisions at this point that you have to make. One is your tax ID or your group tied to an accountable care organizations. And if they are, then you automatically go to the ACO side and check what reporting requirements are that you must meet for them. If you're not tied to an accountable care organization, then you need to decide if you meet any low volume thresholds. And if you do you meet one or two of them, or do you meet all three? Or if you don't at all. And so if you look at both of the eligibility update time periods and see that you're not required to report for the current performance year, that's great. You can wait until the next year to review that year. Let's say you do meet one or two of the low volume thresholds. At that point, you can decide to opt in to the QPP program, but either way, you're not required to report unless you make that opt-in selection. If you do meet all three, you are required to report for MIPS for that current performance year. So you want to start to thinking about a plan for submission. And there's several things to consider. We've just got a few things listed up here that's sort of high level, but you're going to have to decide, are you reporting at the group or are you reporting at the individual submission? You know, if you only have one provider who's eligible versus, several, which is better for your situation. You've got to identify the collection type. Some of these are dependent on whether or not you have an electronic health record, the size of your organization. Small practices can use claim submission for quality measures, large practices can't. And then you're going to have to select clinical quality measures that are applicable to your practice. If you're submitting at the group level, how do you incorporate if you have folks that are multi-specialty, things of that nature. And then consider what your EHR capabilities are, what special statuses apply to your practice. If you're considered a small practice, you get 6 bonus points under the quality category that large practices don't receive. And then do you know what your capability is with the promoting interoperability category? What can your EHR vendor meet so that you're successful in that category as well? So now I'm going to turn it back over to Tabitha. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Robin. So I will cover kind of action planning. This can be a lot of information to digest and take in, especially in a short amount of time, and if you're not familiar with it. But with that said, we at the REC can be part of the action plan for successful attestation in this program. We can help support your organization and work with you to define your priorities and strategize across different programs. We can create targeted aims and objectives and help your organization to align those efforts and help you to determine where your reporting obligations lie. This is not only important to meeting those thresholds and avoiding penalties with the quality payment program, but it's also about improving the outcomes of the patients that you serve. So some alignments to consider is your MIPS categories, your current workflows, other programs such as HEDIS and STAR, whether you're PCMH or PCSP recognized, and also for FQHCs that have to report to UDS, there's also some opportunities for alignment there as well. All right, we thank you guys so much for spending time with us today. If you enjoyed this mini video, you can check out other content on the Whova app. We have all of those different videos listed here. Again, we thank you so much for your time. We're glad that you spent a few minutes with us today, and we hope that you go to the Whova app and check out all this other great content. Thank you guys so much.